Thank you all for being here, and many of you are streaming in from across the globe, and we're great to have you. We're here at Telematic Media Arts, the archive to come, an exhibition of short time-based works by more than 50 artists that are in one form or another responding to the general state of crisis that we're in the midst, and through the lens of the archive, originally inspired by Carla Gannis here, her Wunderkammer project. So this is the first in a series of ongoing artist talks. We will be hosting on Saturdays throughout the run of the show, and we're grateful to have you here, our audience, and I'm grateful to be able to, to introduce today. I think we have, how many artists on the roster? 10, maybe 12 artists. Antonio Roberts, Auriea Harvey, Caroline Sinders, Faith Holland, Mary Flanagan, Mohsen Hazrati, Martina Menegon, Maggie Roberts, Rosa Menkman, Tamiko Thiel, and Gretta Louw. So without further ado, I will hand the mic over to Antonio. Are you ready to lead us off today?
1 second, I'll get my screen shared, but yeah, I think so. So I've got, I guess, 5 minutes to just talk very quickly about my work. I can do that. I can try doing that. Let's try doing that. Okay, share screen. Let me pick a window. Come on, window. All right, so I believe you can just see a picture I'm showing. So I have a work in the exhibition called Submerged, and really it's been made in response to the Black Lives Matter protests that have been happening this year, because of course the movement has been going on for much longer than that, even under different names for decades and yeah, just forever, and rightly so. So my work focuses on Edward Colston, who was a English philanthropist, I can't even say that word, merchant and slave trader from 1636 to 1721. That's when he was alive. And for many, many years, so his he did a lot of good things for the UK at that time. And he was, like many slave traders, he has a statue celebrating his life, which is in Bristol, city in the UK, kind of like near the coast, and so and a lot of what's been happening around this, I'm still learning about it as well. Like, of course, this sort of history, the bad history of the people who celebrate, isn't really taught within schools in the UK. So in June of this year, with the recent Black Lives Matter protests, this statue celebrating the life of this man who was a slave trader was torn down by a group of protesters. So this was the original statue, and you can see here people rolling it down the street. It's been pulled off its statue, and it's now being rolled down the street. And eventually it was taken to a harbour in Bristol and pushed in. You can see here a picture of it being people pushing it in, and there it goes, and it's gone and it's over. Eventually, a few days later, it was retrieved. You can see here it's been retrieved, and it now resides in a museum or it will reside in a museum in Bristol. And I made the work because with all the statues that are being pulled down, certainly more right-leaning people are trying to say that by doing this, we're erasing history, we're rewriting history. And to be honest, I don't think we are. In doing this, like, the statue is up there to celebrate one aspect of this person's life. This person has done a whole load of bad things, but that's not something we're learning about at all. And it belongs, I think the decision to put it in a museum at least allows it to be presented as something, a relic of the times gone past. And to engage with it in an educational way, where you are learning the different sides of this person, what they did, and not celebrating it by having it in such a prominent position within the city centre. So the piece that I made, it's an animated GIF, well, a video, and it starts with the statue, and over the period of a few seconds, it starts to be erased away to the point where underneath it reveals an animation of like water. And I chose water because, one, it reflects like his eventual end, the statue's end, where it was put into the harbour. But also, yeah, through his slave trading, many of the people, and these slaves are people, would have themselves drowned on slave ships. So it's kind of like, it's me learning about this history, as well as revealing this history and engaging with it more. So yeah, it's a process of learning more about, as well, like my history in relation to the UK. So, I probably didn't mention I'm based in the UK, at Birmingham in the UK. So there's so much that isn't told, just that the UK was great. We did lots of good things. We went to different places, and, we just have objects that reside in museums that, we were given them. We didn't steal them. So there's just so much that's just glossed over. And yeah, it's been a real eye-opener, these protests and everything's been happening, just what the injustices that have gone on that have been glossed over and haven't been talked about. So yeah, that's my work, Submerged. I'll play it backwards and now I'll play it forwards. But please do go look at it. I'll probably put it on the internet eventually, but yeah, so that's my work there. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I shall stop sharing my screen. Boop.
Thank you so much, Antonio. Thank you.
Has my screen stopped sharing?
Yes, you are
okay.
good.
Zoom's just crashed for me then, but I'll be back in a moment.
Okay.
Oh, great.
We'll be sure to let you in.
Okay, cool.
Okay, Auriea.
Make sure my mic is on. Hi, hello. I'm Auriea Harvey, and I'm joining you tonight from Rome, Italy. So I'm going to share my screen and talk a moment about what I've done. Maybe I'll share my entire screen and just mess everything up for a second. Hold on. Okay, there we go. The piece I've made for the archive to come is called Islanders. And it's based on these masks that I 3D scanned. This is an installation of plaster casts in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, actually. At least I think that's where it was. This was quite a while ago that I took these impressions. Basically, these photos that you're seeing are the source photos that I used to make a photogrammetry of these masks that I, in the end, made a video of. I'm not really a videographer at all. Like, I don't make video at all, ever. I don't render even. Normally, my work is 3D, meaning most of the time I'm in a program that looks like this. I'm in a, things are, every day I'm looking at things sort of spinning in space in this infinite void. I'm going to back up and just say for a second that my first thought when Carla asked me to submit something to the archive to come, and with all the subject matter that she wanted covered, my first thought was to do something completely else, to work out of anger, actually, because we just got rid of Trump today. Thank the spaghetti monster, thank everything, all the gods, the universe. And so I was originally going to do a tribute to the only tweet I ever sent to Donald Trump, which was purely "fuck you," and I was going to sort of enshrine this somehow. And I had made a sculpture for it too, and it was like a splint that magically made my middle finger sort of erect and retractable. I kind of, that didn't sit well with me. I sort of had talked to someone about this idea, and then I decided that it didn't sit well with me because it's not what I normally do. Like, all this stuff that deals with the physical. Like, I mean, I make sculpture as well. I do make objects, you know, of my 3D works. I make things, I 3D print them. I can show you some like images of some of the things I've done. But the most important thing for me has been using 3D scanning as a way of, you know, when I was trying to tap into some source of inner calm, you know, and not create a work out of reaction and anger, I started looking at my 3D scans. So for example, this is a scan I made of my mother. And I really, like, there's something about 3D scanning that, that has something of the future. For me, it's not photography. It's not capturing a moment. It's not like I've frozen this moment in time and there's everything there, like with context and, you know, something about that particular time when she sat for me. But there is a feeling of the eternal now. Since I do a lot of work on simulations and games technology, for me, that eternal now, that moment that is always running in a simulation is the most important, like, I don't know, kind of time, we'll say. So to me, when I 3D scan something, I'm bringing it, it's not capturing the moment, but it is bringing it into that eternal now. We'll say it like that. So back when I took these images to make a 3D object of them, I was looking at these people's faces and feeling really in their presence. A plaster cast has the same kind of feeling for me as a 3D scan. But it was like they're sort of frozen in this moment where I am encountering them and I'm left to wonder who they are. Where did this come from? You know, I immediately start looking for answers where I'm not going to find any. And these are, all it says in the museum about it is that they are plaster casts of Nias Islanders. And these casts were made in 1910. That was the plaque. That's it. There's very little information on the website. I don't know where these were taken or by whom. But to me, it felt like by trying to capture them again, I was bringing them into a space where I could exist and float with them. So in my piece, Islanders, which is basically just, you know, it's a bad scan. You've seen the source photos. If you know anything about photogrammetry, there's not a chance I'm going to get a pure, clean 3D model out of that series of images. So it was, but when I looked at what I did get, somehow this, I don't know, I'm always sort of at a loss for words when I see a bad scan because it makes me feel things. It puts it in a completely different space for me. But it also made me think, well, why do I like this broken image as opposed to this, you know, whole image? There's a certain amount of poetry there. I don't know. And as I was trying to think about the future, at that moment, I couldn't see a future. And these people whose images were taken so far in the past, I felt a certain connection to this, I guess. And so I made the video, you know, like I said, I don't make video, but I decided to just video my viewport of my 3D program. This is just Blender, you know. I threw in a sky and I clicked around, and to me, this felt like the first, like a rare moment of peace with a sort of political subject, we'll say, you know. It calmed me, and I felt like this was a moment of beauty that I would prefer to share, you know, when I think about like everything that's going on in the world. So that's what I did. Thank you.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you so much. And yeah, that rare moment of peace.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Fantastic.
I am. All right, let's see if this works. Oops, sorry. Can you see my screen?
Yep. Yeah.
Great. So thank you so much for having me, Carla. And it's good to see so many friends here, especially tonight, right now, in this moment. And thank you for inviting me to participate in the archive, both Carla and Clark. I really appreciate that. I'm Caroline. I'm an artist based in Berlin. And a lot of my work deals with human rights research and then artistic interventions inside of that research within technology. And the piece that I have is a video piece I made in response to facial recognition. I think about designing critical and intersectional responses to AI. So thinking of what are different kinds of interventions. Oops, sorry, where is my mouse? There it is. And so this piece that I'm looking at is looking at emotion, so facial recognition systems and emotion recognition systems that are used inside of artificial intelligence. Emotion recognition systems use facial recognition and computer vision to understand and look at emotions in the face. And this is probably a very obvious form of bias, of like malfeasance by technology. So according to a study created by MIT's Joy Bellamy, cited in the New York Times, she was looking at a variety of different computer vision and emotion recognition programs. And one specifically she looked at was Amazon's system recognition, which had much more difficulty in recognizing gender and dark-skinned faces and female faces. Recognition performed worse than software by both Amazon and by Microsoft and IBM, even though both Microsoft and IBM's software isn't very accurate. In the study, recognition made no errors in recognizing the gender of lighter-skinned men, so color me shocked. And the reason I sort of find this system interesting is thinking of where does computer vision facial recognition systems, where are they implemented in our everyday lives? And in a lot of different places, right? If you've crossed an international border, which I'm assuming most of you probably haven't in the past few months, but some of you I know have. If you're crossing different borders, like they are using things like computer vision to look at and match up your face, right? And what I am interested in is thinking of all the varying forms of harm that exist within this system and this kind of interaction. What does it feel like to be unreadable at a border crossing or any space where technology is implemented? What are the ways that you opt in or opt out? What are all the problems really tied to that? But anyway, moving forward, facial recognition and emotional recognition are used in such even like more, one could argue, more obviously bad ways. So emotion recognition and facial recognition being used in hiring. So if these things are incredibly faulty, imagine, you can already start to imagine the problems of this being used in a hiring context, or even more obviously in a law enforcement context. One thing I'm also sort of interested in is then the design problems even outside of this scope. So how does a product get made? How do we sort of talk about it? There's a startup called Faceception by an Israeli an Israeli startup, which is detecting emotion in faces. And one of the reasons I find this premise also interesting to study is how many of you have heard of resting bitch face? Probably most of you. One of my really good friends in New Orleans has what I call like resting bitch voice, like almost no inflection when she's speaking. So when I text her like, oh, I'm coming back home to New Orleans, she'll often respond with a bunch of emojis and say, oh, I'm so excited to see you. But when I actually see her, it's always like, I've missed you. How are you? It's been so long. But she is emoting. She is very excited, but her emotions are not perhaps lining up in a way that we think in a Western US context of what happiness is. But even like extending that metaphor even further, how many of you have ever laughed or smile to diffuse a dangerous situation. You know, if you are a marginalized person, you've probably done that. So the premise of something like emotion recognition, even if it worked perfectly, the premise of its existence is already flawed because we do not express ourselves in a one-to-one way with our emotions we're actually feeling. A lot of that is because we can't. It could be dangerous for us to do that. And another reason is also just society, like the societal constraints of emotions. We can't actually express our distaste in a lot of spaces. It would be rude. Noticing how I'm looking at the time right now and seeing how we're sort of, I'm about to go over. I started diving into emotion recognition systems and the history of them. A lot of, or most emotion recognition systems are based on a system developed in the 1980s called MFACS, where there's this belief that there's 6 universally expressed emotions. So anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, surprise, and that we express them across all cultures equally. And again, the premise of this is not necessarily true. So what I made was a video of like 4 different moments in like my day-to-day life in Berlin. And then I ran Amazon's recognition system over this video stills. You can see this in Mozilla Hubs. You can see this in the archive as well. I think this clip hopefully, yeah, so then this is me like walking to work. But yeah, thank you so much. I will stop sharing. Oh.
I had a paused snap there. Thank you so much, Caroline.
Yes.
Fantastic. And Faith, are you ready?
Hi. Okay. So I was going to actually talk about a little bit more than just the piece that I made. Maybe that's crazily overambitious. We'll see what happens. Oh, do I have a time calendar? Okay, anyway, hi, I'm Faith. I know most of the people in this room, but just to give a little bit of context, I generally work on the kind of intersection of, oh God, I'm getting nervous with this time limit, technology and intimacy. And this work kind of comes out of thinking about the effect of porn on our devices and has evolved to think about different kinds of intimacy, like care and physical closeness and various other forms. So 2020 has been a very long year. And I was launching this project at the very beginning of the year called Soft Computing. And it was really about devices that are meant to be touched and that are appealing to touch because they're soft, but they also can't betray us. They can't spy on us. They can't sell our data. They can't do all the nefarious things that we know our technologies do, right? We're saturated now with this information about all the horrible things that actually Zoom does even to us. The other part of this project, and this is not a Zoom bomb, was the most beautiful dick pics. And these two kind of went together as literally hard and soft, which was the title of the show, but also thinking about these different intimacies with technology, right? Dick pics being very often unwanted, this feels incredibly ironic, unwanted images that appear to us and kind of reclaiming the form and making something beautiful, and also having a kind of play with gender, right? What is the play of making something that's normally hard soft, or visualizing it when it is soft, and removing the kind of gender signifiers that we're used to having with dicks. This work launched right before lockdown. Just maybe a week before, and was supposed to go on to a proper solo exhibition in LA, but obviously that just didn't happen because I couldn't even get on an airplane. And so my thinking about this work kind of radically changed between the time of when the solo exhibition was supposed to happen and when we kind of accepted that it was going to have to go online and not be what we thought it would be. And in that time, my family lost 2 people, and the world was different, and probably most people lost someone across the world, actually, in a kind of global event I've never experienced in my life, and hope never to again. So the work changed. This is a piece I called Detumescence, which kind of unites the work, thinking again about softness. It's all kind of about softness at the end of the day. And these are different works that are different elements that decay at these different rates, right? So technology decays at a different rate than the flowers and the fruit do. The plushies are also going to decay at a different rate. But it is a memento mori in the kind of traditional sense, a remembrance of death, and also a kind of memorial to people whose lives have been lost this year, which continues to grow, unfortunately. And part of this work and part of it all going online and our new reality of everything being online, like this exhibition and like this talk, was thinking about how to communicate this idea of touch when I couldn't literally have people come into a gallery and touch these objects that I had made for them to hug. And so what I ended up doing with the exhibition, Hard Soft, and the piece that I also am contributing to this exhibition, because I think it's relevant here too, is a piece that I did with the sculptures in this kind of post in-person space that we've been in this year, thinking about this almost new level of intimacy that we've reached with our technologies, where I think in a kind of unprecedented way, everything is coming through as often a single or maybe a few select screens. And so in this work, I actually recreate a photograph from a Time magazine article about cyber porn, where there's this man who is hugging a computer and it's glowing. You see the glow coming out from his body. And it's meant to be this really like seedy, disgusting scene of the man like being way too involved in his computer and in the things that he's accessing. And I've always thought it was so beautiful, actually, and always really wanted to engage with the image. So I kind of recreated it and really intimately touch the plushie and embrace it in this kind of maybe this fantasy I've had of embracing a computer for a very long time, like this image that I saw. It's referenced in Wendy Chen's Control and Freedom when she talks about cyber porn. And yeah, maybe that's all I'll say, because I am probably over time or at time at this point. So yeah, thank you for including me, and thank you for listening to my little spiel.
Thank you. Oh, there was a comment in the chat, Faith, that you should have gone first, given our Zoom bombing situation.
And then we could have just all blended together with the bombing.
Yeah. But
I could bomb back.
Yeah, you could bomb back. Right. That was great. Mary, are you ready?
I was making chat. Hold on. Anyway.
Making chat is good.
I'm making chat. Yes, I am ready. I am ready. I am ready.
Oh, by the way, you all, I just went ahead and locked the Zoom room. If anybody texts you and they're trying to get in, let me know and I'll unlock it. But I just did that as a precaution because we were still getting some more kind of strange
Yes, we
visitors.
were.
Yeah.
Yes, we were. So I wanted to just mention my background, because this project is not showing with this collection of work. But this background is of my artificial intelligence that's trained on the work of women artists only. And so she's a feminist artificial intelligence that I've been working on for the last year or so. So I could talk about that at another time, but that is not what is in the show. So I just wanted to mention that because I know some of you are doing critical studies, AI, critical tech stuff. So here we are. The call for work from Carla and Clark was really complex and really tried to capture the zeitgeist of this moment, which is so messy. It was really, probably for most of us, hard to decide like how many ways our work fits into that space, because it fits in so many places actually. So I wanted to just show a piece that's currently I'll share a screen in a minute. That's going on kind of as a daily basis during the coronavirus crisis. On February 8th, 2020, the U.S. recorded its first coronavirus death, and it's an interesting date to remember. By March 16th, there were 23 deaths, and I'm going to share my screen. I have to kind of not see you to do this, and I can't show too long because my battery in my computer actually is not behaving so well. So it basically my work grinds my computer to a halt with Zoom on at the same time. So we'll just work with it. So I decided to create these drawings, these computer drawings as acts of memorials to those who have lost their lives during the coronavirus pandemic. And so this is, for example, April 4th in the United States national scene. And obviously, most of us are frustrated by various responses. It's a terrible, painful time, and I wanted to kind of make some kind of marker where every single color in the entire project would represent a person. So every day I start with a nudged color palette, and I render. So each one of these lines is someone who's been lost this year. And I wanted to do this kind of thing where I took the formal language of minimalism and then reintroduce narrative into it by seeing these daily drawings as visualizations, but that actually meant that real people were around. So I want to engage using this minimalist world, kind of worldview. I want to engage with every single person that if I could. So I'm just going to show you a few. This is April 4th. Oops, here, let me reload this. Here we have September 11th, just in Houston, the deaths just in Houston, Texas, where I have been recently. I'm wondering about my neighbors, wondering about, who around me is being lost. This one, I'm gonna have to reload, is September 11th. And, this drawing represents the national data from September 11th. So in 2001, many of us were in New York, probably, or people who were. 2,996 people were killed in the terrorist attack. And then the 2020 pandemic, on the same day, over 1,000 Americans died from the virus. So a third of the amount of the U.S. terrorist attack died in the United States that day. So as we started to prepare for this archive to come, I thought, gosh, this project maybe is some kind of daily archive of this mismanaged response. Yes, I know that nature happens, but that's not what happened. And the virus has killed more Americans in World War I. As of September 21st, 200,000 people have died. Every day is this kind of horror, and I wanted to make something beautiful as a memorial, as a digital memorial for that situation. So it's an ongoing project. I hope it ends. I hope it stops. But I'm following it through, and I hope I don't run out of colors, because then I'm really screwed. But anyway, that's my project for the show. Each one of them runs as a video for 5 minutes in the installation. In the installation, one video runs for 5 minutes, but that's how it can play out. But they're each little Python scripts.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we all hope it stops. Yep, agreed, Rosa. Mohsen, are you ready?
Hello, yes.
Hello.
I'm just going to share my screen.
Yay.
Okay. Please check with me if you see and hear me. Yeah.
Yes.
We can see
Okay.
you. Yep, you're there.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be a part of this exhibition, show, and this talk. I'm really happy to be here with you. I'm Mohsen. I'm artist from Iran, Shiraz, and currently in Academy Study Tour in Stuttgart in Germany. And the project that I have for the exhibition called RTTT, which is about render to texture. But generally, my project is about the combination of Iranian mystical literature, or mostly focused on Shirazi, with digital technologies. And in this project, I focused more on the importance of mirrors and reflections in this literature. And the name is Render Through Texture, which is inspired by render to texture. It's a technology usually in computer, like in 3D softwares, in real-time technologies. This is a simulated scene of one of the versions of this project to realize a little bit more. In this project, like for example, right here is exactly a webcam that I'm recording from my laptop, and there is a virtual camera here, which is recording this virtual webcam and put it on a render to texture here. So this way I can split this render to texture everywhere, all around the scene and everywhere. Yeah, this one is also, I mean, this kind of facing like to mirror or like render to texture is also inspired by like this poetry. I will go a little bit ahead and talk about it. Yeah, I made this way to talk a little bit more. And this photo is Eram Garden in Shiraz. I just wanted to say, my works are so much related to the culture of Shiraz. And this is this is the tomb of Hafez, which is really inspiring me for my projects. Actually, the start of this project start from one of the poetries from Hafez. And yeah, this is the tomb of Hafez, which I really love. When I'm in Iran, I usually go there. And the actual photo. So I, for the first installation of render to texture project, I used this parrot because I was really inspired by a poetry of Hafez, which was about how to learn parrots to talk. So there, Hafez mentioned an old story about putting a mirror in front of parrot and talk behind the mirror. So parrot start thinking about there is another parrot in front and start learning. And Hafez used this metaphor in a really beautiful way to talk about like his poetries and his kind of like thoughts and what he said generally. And I was really inspired by this poetry, and I simulate kind of this. And also I made a couple of versions of this like parrot with like an installation with Raspberry Pi. Or for this exhibition, I focused on another meaning, another using of mirrors and reflections, which was really inspiring me, which was about knee. I found some metaphors in some poetries, which was really beautiful for me. Was like this way of sitting, which is like you put your head into your knee. It's a kind of like sitting when we are as human, we are sad or I don't know, thinking so deep or this kind of things. And this way of sitting and knee is used as a metaphor of searching through a spiritual world. So I found really beautiful poetry from Khagani and Dehlavi. There are two poets. They even talk about there is a university in the bone of me. So when you put your head, you go to you just get rid of the world and this kind of things and start a spiritual journey, which was really inspired me. And also the fact of using like working on this concept was because there is no ability to use actually render to texture inside Mozilla Hub. So I just go with this installation to talk about this aspect of using mirror in our literature. And yeah, thank you so much. And finally, with love, awesome. Thank you. I stopped my screen.
Thank you. Wow. Wow.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I seem to have the same expression for each one of your presentations. Wow. But I'm just so enjoying getting you all to unpack the concepts in your work and share more. This is great. And just a little aside, Caroline, I unlocked the meeting. Does anybody need to let someone in right now? If you have, we'll just take this short break. If anyone needs to let anyone in, if anyone's been texted, I unlocked it for a few minutes. We're all good?
I'm good. He's just going to sit next to me.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, welcome. So next is Martina. Are you ready?
Hello. Yes.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here and see so many smiling faces. Tuning in from Vienna, so it has been quite a hard week, but it's nice to be seeing smiling people. So I'm gonna start with a bit of screen sharing. Hopefully I'm not messy with that. I hope you can see it, yeah. So for the exhibition that Carla and Clark organized, and again, super thank you for having me in this amazing show. I propose Mozilla Hubs and a 3D sculpture of a work that has been going on since more or less a year. I've been kind of creating different iteration of it. The very first iteration was a GIF. I was asked to create in 2019 for an exhibition where they had this concept of like selling GIFs, and I kind of wanted to have something really pretty done with my body. So in my work, I usually work with a 3D scan of myself. And the reason why I do that is, it started because, I'm at home, I'm here. So that was like the first material I could grab right away. But it became really a sort of, if you want, obsession on like, and also therapeutic kind of process of engaging with my virtual selves and finding way to connect and to dialogue with all these avatars and all these accounts that we create, maybe not daily, but quite often. And I wanted, because I'm really not good at dancing and I'm really shy, so I wanted to create my body in the virtual dancing beautifully. And I wanted also not to really motion capture myself, because again, I'm not really that good in dancing. I really didn't want to use an animation that you would find online that someone else was motion capturing. So I was searching for a script that would generate dance movements for avatars or for virtual characters. And I was really happy to find one that was free to use. And somehow a mistake happened in me using this script. So in the end, even in the virtual, my body turned out to dance like this. So what happened was basically my body was pushed to the floor and the arms started to enter the body and the legs were never being really fully up. And when I saw that, I, of course, had this moment of laugh at the beginning, but then somehow I felt so strongly this kind of traumatic or anxiety moment of these bodies being trapped into the mistake that I caused. So me trying to make something nice for my virtual body ended up in causing a sort of tragic moment for them. But I was not that happy to have this project as a 2D outcome. So I started to think how to bring it into a 3D place. And I had different iteration. Was actually the 3D sculpture that you can see in Mozilla Hubs. And this was basically one moment of this, let's call it dance, being fixed and then exported. And then this became the 3D sculpture you can either see it on Sketchfab, where you can zoom in and out or rotate, or in Mozilla Hubs, you can navigate around it. And I think this was, I forgot about it because I didn't really publish it, but it was also the first sculpture I brought into Mozilla Hubs when I started to experience with that during the pandemic or the lockdown here in Austria. And then I kind of wanted to have this script or like this mystic happening on a like live simulation. So I created a project that was shown both in a physical space here in Vienna and online in Mozilla Hubs. So that's a very particular space in Vienna. It's a vitrine, or like a glass window. You cannot enter, you can just pass by and look at the work that is inside. And I put 2 monitors. In the upper one, you will have the live simulation. So those bodies would just constantly dance, run by this algorithm. So they would always have different moves. And in the Mozilla Hub space, you would just have in the second monitor a live stream of the Mozilla Hub space. That means you could also check the avatars or like other users going in and out or chatting. So you could kind of spy on them from the physical space. And in the Mozilla Hubs, due to the limitation, it's just like a baked few seconds of the animation or of the stance. Yeah, and this is the project you can find on the exhibition. So that's like a virtual sculpture, but you feel free also to jump into my Mozilla Hubs. Is open always until I leave it on. I think it will stay on for a long time. And yeah, the main difference is that in Mozilla Hubs, you can really enter and be immersed in this dance. So you're really part of this kind of muffled club, weird scene. So yeah, I think that that was from my side. Thank you again for having me.
Fantastic. And wow, just because I always say wow. Some great comments. Just checking, I heard there was someone else getting in. I have opened it back up so that if you have any friends who want to join, because I know people like to come in, you know, at different times. Anybody who's a co-host, you should be able to let them in now. Okay. All right. And I was also saying that I had everything in alphabetical order with names, but I'm realizing that's not totally the case. But anyway, without further ado, Rosa, you're next. Yay!
Yay! I'm next. Wait, I'm gonna take this off because then I don't have to hear myself double. I also need to share my screen. So if you're gonna talk to me, please talk to me on the chat, because otherwise I can't actually hear you. But I need to test this because I didn't get to test if the sound works. So, oh no, I didn't put any sound, so that doesn't matter. This is a little bit complicated actually, because I had another idea about this. Then I saw how you all did it. Okay, let's do it like this. So, no, that's not on the right screen. I'm gonna reshare my screen. Sorry guys, when we were setting up, everything was happening. Share. Okay. Yes, now you can see me full screen, is that true? Yes, okay, cool. So thank you again, Clark and Carla. And I wanted to present this work that I did for the Telematic Wunderkammer. It's called Perfect 365 Decalibration. And it's a work that was made actually before COVID time. So I look much better than I do these days. It's an exploration of beautifying software, specifically an app for the iPhone that's called Perfect 365. And in the tagline of the software, it says 365 Perfect is the best free virtual makeup app, period. It's like having a glam squat in your pocket. So what the photo app does is it deletes blemishes, it brightens and softens the skin, it can deepen the smile or put virtual lipsticks or lip tattoos, enlarge the eyes or make the face slimmer. It can lift your cheeks, enhance the nose, resize the lips, just to name a few areas of perfection. So in 365 Perfect Decalibration, I use the app to make myself perfect, not just once or twice, but actually many, many, many times. And every time I use the app, I would get one shade lighter or slimmer or brighter. And by resaving my newly beautified face, each iteration, the artifacts of a recompressed JPEG and the absurdity of beautifying standards are amplified incrementally. Just as a question, can you actually see the animation? Yeah, cool, okay. So this became a careful exploration of generation loss, the loss of quality between subsequent copies or transcoding of data. So anything that reduces the quality of the representation when copying would cause further reduction in quality and making the copy of the copy, it became just this like very bad, beautiful image. And what's funny, I think, for the file lovers amongst us is that it can be that the file size actually increases due to generation loss. So the work was also released after and in reflection of the early findings I had during a research paper that I wrote, which was called Behind White Shadows. And in that paper, I researched the genealogy of color test cards and the racial biases that are often informing our image processing calibration cards. So many image processing technologies have only ever been calibrated and tested on Caucasian models. And what I wondered was like, who actually is making these test cards? Who is deciding the point of view? From what perspective are we scanning or creating our image technologies? Who is actually casting the shadows on every image that we're creating? And I realized then that we need to be more conscious of these technologies because they're actually kind of creating this war of image processing technologies in the realms of our images. So it's not just in the direct plane in which we see the images, but actually it's also beyond the fold. That's also what we saw in Caroline's presentation. And they're often at the expense of the marginalized. So what I wanted is this like color test card, but a decalibration kind of color test card. And I started to like play around with this concept, and from this work came out. So thank you. Now I have to stop screen sharing. Yay.
Thank you so much. I was just checked on Twitter to see if we have any guests coming. What has been so fun about the show, and I don't want to hold us up so much, but for Clark and I is, you know, curatorially, we kind of created these loose categories, but one of the reasons the hub space is this circular configuration is so that you can make kind of new connections between works. And, you know, as you present your work, finding that there are so many different interconnected threads running throughout all of the work and the research that you are doing now. So Maggie, are you ready to present? And I'm sorry, I flipped the order there. So Maggie, please present now. Thank you.
That's yeah. Hi everyone. So I don't know anyone apart from Clark, because I showed at Telematic. Time's gone so non-linear. 2009 with Ranu Mukherjee, who is, some of you will know, in San Francisco. So I've actually got two pieces in the show, because one is with Ranu as Orphan Drift, which is our long-term collaboration, and the other one's as me. Both of them, projects have involved trying to think through the alien consciousness of the octopus, which is a distributed consciousness that's in fluid, always changing, non-horizon-y, non-perspective kind of world. And I've been thinking about that a lot, to do with how AI could possibly learn from an entity that wasn't human. So that's been ongoing for 3 years with me, which is rare that something's had such a sort of in-depth time in my brain and heart. But anyway, so in response to COVID, also apologies, there's a sort of cyclone actually going on outside. I can't hear myself, and I hope you can hear me enough. Anyway, yeah, so in response to feeling really isolated, but in a very interesting, introspective space, because I had 3 days, I was in South Africa filming, and I had 3 days to decide whether to go back to or not before they closed the international borders here, and I decided to stay here, not understanding what a pandemic might mean. Anyway, so I'm still here, and that was March, I think. And so I've been spending a lot of time with octopuses as a result, which is amazing, and also missing out on the horror that London has become in many ways. So I thought I wanted to give my friends all over the world who are having a really hard time something soothing. So I've been making these becoming octopus meditations, which I'm just trying to find. So Clark and Carla got a version. God damn, where's it gone? Sorry, everyone. There we are.
Yeah.
I'm gonna. Oh no, that's the wrong one. What is going on? Here we go. So I'm just going to share my screen. So can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, I made a kind of promo for the meditations for the exhibition. And I'm very angry and feeling very passionate about so many things that have been dealt with in this show by all the artists, and I just am bowled over by how much amazing work there is and such great curation. I'm just going to slip that one in. So I was trying to make it something alien and other, and trying to undo our comfortable sense of representation and sort of Western sense of knowing and controlling everything, and also make it a meditation. But that was a bit weird. So I accidentally met a young woman who's a blender genius, and I've been on an amazing journey with her over the last 2 months. And I got a small grant and was able to pay her to help me learn this software, which I've been wanting to get into for years. Oh, and this is the Cape Town amazing rich kelp forests, which you may have seen in My Octopus Teacher, which by Craig Foster, who's a local here, who came out the same night as my meditations, actually. So yep, I was trying to make a mixture of synthetic, artificial, and get a sense of filmic presence that's got no horizon and feels like 360-degree touch, which is on all of the meditations, getting more and more weird and insane until the last one is a kind of VR experience. So if you, wrong thing, watching Stalker for some students. Where's the other film gone? Sorry, I'm so all over the place, as we can see. The other piece is moving on from the show we had at Telematic last year, which was called if AI were cephalopod, and was thinking about what kind of body might I'm going to stop the noise sound. What kind of body might inhabit an AI, or an AI could inhabit? It's complete science fiction, but trying to deal with a lot of the inadequacies of our imagination around what AI could be doing. And that is Claustrophobia Backwards, the title, which we thought of as an AI looking out of a screen and wondering where it is and what it's inhabiting. This is the one we put in Telematic. And so we made this very quickly and surely, which was interesting, from a mixture of work that just screens we had from all the stuff that's been going on in the last year. And a lot of Randy's obviously in San Francisco, and then some of the Blender work I've been doing. And the sense of claustrophobia, looking out on nature and oceans that we can't get to, stuck behind our screens, was obviously a response to exactly that. That's what we have been so much in screen space, in lockdowns. And we're also trying to make something that didn't make any sense in a human narrative way, which Orphan Drift always does, but this one felt quite special. It's very collaged and made very intuitively. And yeah, I mean, ending up, I think, with wanting to feel hope, and that the development of algorithmic surveillance and financial markets, and yeah, it's all so dark and seems insurmountable sometimes. And it's quite straight. The great thing about lockdown for me and many of my friends who are also artists is it's given us time to I'm going to stop screen sharing. It's given us time to I've lost my screen. Where's Zoom gone? I've lost Zoom. Stop sharing. There we go. Anyway, it's given us time to be in community together. And this show I just have found absolutely incredible. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Tamiko, you'll be next.
Okay, thanks so much, Carla and Clark, for inviting me. And the piece that I have in the show was actually a commission from the Nantes Buch Foundation, which deals with art and nature. And this is just a selection of it. They asked in the spring for videos that dealt with the concept of spring and with nature. And I've worked a lot in augmented reality since 2010. And so I created this AR app that I call Suspended Spring. And that I'll let's see if this can run. Hello. There we go. So you see, I created this particle system of just floating and fading in and out cherry blossom petals, and I'm filming, in the app. So I'm walking through my apartment, and this was at the time of the lockdown here in Munich, when we were supposed to only leave for necessary food shopping, and we were allowed to go on walks, but there was this sense of the spring passing us by, the whole natural world bursting into beautiful spring, and we were supposed to stay inside as much as possible, and how the world sort of you know, for those of us lucky to be able to stay inside and work from home, everything started focusing very much on these sort of rituals. And well, maybe I'll run that a bit again. And so you can get this on the app. Let me. You can run it on an app, but then I made this video with it, and then Carla asked me to put it into Mozilla hubs in some way. Let's see if I can start the other video. And you've probably seen it because it seems to be in the middle. I reconstructed it as a particle system in Mozilla hubs. It's the first time I've worked in Mozilla hubs, but the particle system works very nicely. And then Carla very graciously placed it in this beautiful location against her, I don't know, milk, I don't know what you call them. They're like milk splash figures in the middle of this huge milk drop or something. And if I'm not wrong, it's also the only audio running. And you know, I don't know how many people in the West know that falling cherry blossoms in Japan are actually a symbol of young samurai who die in battle. Young men who blossom into beauty and then die at their moment of greatest beauty. So for people coming from a Japanese context, there's also the cherry blossoms are not only beautiful and sort of a national obsession when they bloom, but there's also this a very traditional old connection with death and with life being really extinguished at the moment of its most beautiful, luxurious blooming. So so that seemed to me to be an apt expression for a lot of what was happening around us, around the world at that time, of so many people dying all over the world, and dying at a point, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, when nature was most exuberant and most beautiful. The sound for it is the song Sakura, but stretched out, so it's more of a drone, and you might even say it's like a dirge. And then a Japanese friend of mine pointed out that it also is very much like the gagaku, the court music from very early Japan, maybe I don't know, 700 of the Common Era or so. So I was really delighted to see that it worked very, very well in Mozilla hubs. It works well as a video and well as an AR app. It's a rather portable piece. And, also for my Japanese sensibilities, it's a little bit weird showing it in the middle of the fall when, you should be focusing on the beautifully bright colored leaves. But as a memorial of that moment in the spring when coronavirus was spreading all over the world, then I think it's okay to show it here. And I'm very grateful to Carla and Clark for inviting me to do so. Thank you, and I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. Just my head is exploding in all the good ways, Greta, are you ready?
Hi. Okay, so thank you so much. This has been a really wonderful evening to hear all of you. Thank you so much to all the other artists, and of course to Carla and Clark for putting this together. I know this would have been an enormous amount of work at a time when work is both never ending and particularly challenging. So thanks for that. Okay. So I think I'm going to be able to share Oh, okay, no. I will not be sharing as I had thought. So what I'm just going to speak about the work that I made today. So in the background behind me, there's a still from a video that I made. And this video is actually, it's a video made from an excerpt of a 6-channel sound installation that I made actually at the end of last year for a solo show here in Munich. I'm also in Munich. And the entire piece is 45 minutes approximately in duration, but it's split up into 6 different channels. And there are some textile panels and digital prints there. And the idea is that the viewer or the listener in this case can kind of dip in and out of this soundscape. And the idea is that it's a fragmented narrative that essentially sort of comes together in this self-chosen, self-directed pathway. So the piece really tries to traverse the intermingling of the digital and the physical and reflecting on the biological, ecological and psychological effects of, you know, this kind of march towards forecast technological utopias. So in thinking about where capital T tech is kind of headed, where our societal reliance on that is taking us, you know, how are we being affected? How is our ecosystem being affected? And what are the kind of interactions between those? So it is, I mean, I guess you would say it is a speculative science fiction, although there is a lot of research that's gone into it. And some of the case studies that I was reading about to bring into the piece ended up sounding stranger than any science fiction that you could come across. So I'm not sure how many people are here are familiar with the shutdowns of nuclear power plants on the coasts of a numerous range of countries, from Israel up to Scotland, Sweden. And basically what's happening there is there are these, you know, power plants, whether they're nuclear or otherwise, on the coasts. They have these huge kind of wastewater pipes that run out into the ocean. And when there are these jellyfish blooms, which can be hundreds of thousands, millions of jellyfish, they actually kind of wash up into the wastewater pipes, blocking the flow of the wastewater and therefore shutting down the power station. So this is a thing that I found out about, I think probably in 2015 or so, and that just is such a fertile metaphor. And there's so much about it that's so sort of cyclical as well. Like the idea that jellyfish blooms are becoming more of a problem, they're increasing in size and frequency because of the environmental pollution and warming of the waters and all these kinds of things that have to do with anthropogenic climate change. And then they also then in doing so have this kind of other interaction then with the machinery of that propagating climate change, essentially. Then there was another case that I'll just mention because this blows my mind, of it had been a quarry, I believe, in Japan, and as happens in many places, when the quarry was decommissioned, they turned the pit into a lake. And there were scientists, you know, sort of investigating the life that it was existing within this lake, and they found a species of jellyfish that essentially did not require any external food source because it had algae growing within its transparent body. And is this fascinating process of the jellyfish essentially farming its own food within its body, so it can go up towards the surface of the water to allow the jellyfish inside its transparent body to photosynthesize, which it can then metabolize, and then as it sort of sinks back down to the bottom of the water, it has this food source that it takes with it. And you know, this really, you know, sort of led me down a path of thinking about climate change in a totally different way, you know, thinking about it not just in this kind of this horror mode, I suppose, of like catastrophe on the one hand, or, you know, just trying to ignore the realities of what's going on the other, but, you know, trying to kind of remove this I suppose, what can sometimes be considered like a moralizing aspect to it as well, and just thinking about it in terms of interactions within a system, and whatever interactions we have, that is going to have feedback reactions within this incredibly complex network. Essentially, it's a network. And so, yeah, that led me down this path of thinking about which species, be they real or fictional, speculative, are benefiting from climate change, climate catastrophe, and also from the sort of ongoing pollution of the oceans. How are they benefiting? What are the processes that are going on? So another example that I can speak about from that piece, from the sound piece that I did, was research that was done in the at the site of the Deep Horizon oil spill, which, as we know, several years ago resulted in millions of liters of, or gallons of oil being sunk to the bottom of the ocean in this place. And there's this beautifully poetic scientific article actually written about, which is basically just describing the reaction of these scientists to these biologists, marine biologists, who are actually sort of exploring other things in the area, and they had a bit of extra time with their, you know, underwater robots or whatever, and decided to go and check out this site and see what was happening. And they just beautifully described this sort of horrifying scene of, you know, a landscape that has been just plunged into darkness and covered in this kind of thick, oozing, you know, materialization really of liquid slow time, you know. And what they had discovered was that huge numbers of crabs essentially were populating this area, and in fact they were being somehow drawn to the site of the spill. And there was some speculation about the fact that that might be that because there are substances within their own shells that have something in common with the molecules in the oil, that maybe that was pulling them in or whatever. But so there was this, yeah, I mean, it's a super interesting case about how the creatures, the crustaceans, are being kind of pulled into this site, and then once they're there, the site is acting upon them in such a rapid way so that they're developing huge numbers of cancers and tumors and things like that, and all kinds of strange shaped crustaceans. And that then, you know, in turn, they have become kind of a child and offspring of that space, and belong to that space in a way that we can't really, I think, conceive of from the point of view of this kind of, you know, good versus bad idea about climate change. So, yeah, I'm getting a little bit off track because, as you can tell, there's like a huge amount of stuff that I find super fascinating about this. But basically, the piece in the show is it's using an excerpt of a video from this larger installation, and then I kind of populated that with a range of different video materials from GIFs that I've been making for 5-6 years now, that are kind of combining aspects of marketing imagery around the digital, whether that be from cloud logos through to you know, network images, glowing node maps and servers and things like that, and combining them with images of jellyfish in a sort of attempt to visualize digitalization in a different way. And then also appropriated 3D models and things like that, kind of combining all of that into this one video. And what I think, where I'll end with this, well, two things. I think one is, it's really, the focus is really on talking about these tangled connections between the biosphere, the technosphere, and human action. And the other thing I think is that this work was made pre-pandemic. The exhibition was at the end of 2019 and went into January of this year. And then, you know, a month or two later, we were suddenly dealing with the realities of this, you know, these tangled connections in such an extreme way, as, you know, I think most artists have spoken about tonight. Knowing that these zoonotic viruses are a direct result of our acting upon the environment and our, you know, intrusions into parts of our environment that we haven't intruded into before, and, you know, really thinking about whether it's possible or likely that this is the last time that we deal with this kind of a thing. You know, I mean, it is a sort of a porous barrier, and one that we continue to put more holes into. So I think, yeah, much as that's not a very pleasant thought, you know, I think, I mean, in a way, viruses are also species, right? And so they're sort of thriving also from our actions. So yeah, there's a, that's probably not a very happy point to end. Maybe I can just say that, you know, the upside of that is, like, it's been, not upside, but, you know, one aspect of that I've been thinking about a lot more is, you know, these ideas of networks and the ideas of being connected, not just in terms of the internet, like now with all of these different artists, different places, different cultures being connected here, literally in this one little grid that I'm looking at, but also, you know, beyond the human, beyond the digital, in a very, very physical and embodied way. Like, there are so many connections between all of us, you know. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Let me unmute myself. Wow, that summed up so much about the show. Wow, motorcycle is a whole, there's a lot of noise outside my window that I hope you all aren't hearing right now.
No, we can't hear it.
Oh, okay. And
but we're happy it's happening.
But yeah, I mean, it's just more a big celebration, you know, like, this is good. But Gretta, I mean, I feel like, you know, those tangled connections, and, you know, the fact that some artists in the show contributed earlier works, and then some of you also, either in response to COVID, made works, or some artists actually created new work specifically for the show. But again, another kind of aspect to the show that seems to be very kind of present is this idea of all these tangled networks. And I think, you know, we've had to deal with it in a very intense way in the past 8 or 9 months, but I think prescient artists like yourselves over the past few years have seen all of these things accumulating and coming up. And so you've been speaking to them in your work for quite some time. I also, I'd like Clark, of course, as co-curator and hosting our whole event at Telematic, to speak. And also I wanted to welcome the other artists in the show who are here today, and that we want this always to be an inclusive space. We had a kind of sign up sheet, but if any of the other artists who are here in the show today would like to speak or talk, please join in. Clark, anyone?
Well, my hope would be that maybe now we could open the floor to questions to one another. Certainly there's been so much presented here today, and there's, right, that we can't do justice to any of the projects really, but questions are coming up for me, and actually I gained deeper insights into the work, and you know, just at the beginning, in particular, Auriea introduced this idea of responding with anger and frustration, and you know, through the work and meditating on the work, finding a way instead to cultivate a space of peace and resilience, and you know, the possibility of a hope. Maggie spoke also about trying to sustain a sense of hope, and I don't know if I had appreciated that in so much of the work in this show, but also took that as a spirit from the presentation today. Antonio's, your remarks too, and maybe you could speak to it further. I was really struck by that idea, right? When in looking at your piece, it looks like an effacement of an ugly history, right? At face value, that the digital synthesis is occluding the history that had been glorified previously. But your presentation, right, and in a way cast that whole movement in a different light to say this isn't about effacing history, this is about doing history, right? That it's actually unearthing and presenting and explaining, clarifying in a way in which the monumental. Is that a strategy in your work more generally, or is it you know, something that emerged from this
It's something that really has emerged. Like, I'll try and be brief. Like, most of my work has usually been around copyright, and especially you know, who gets to own things. But then, especially in like kind of like last year or so, I've been thinking about, at least, you know, copyright is a kind of very Western idea, and that definitely links into a lot of conversations that are happening right now about museums giving artifacts back to repatriating artifacts, because they didn't just come to be owned by museums, they were stolen, people died, and yeah, so like in the work that I'm making, like I'm looking more about that, the work that I'm going to be making and currently am making, looking at least the history of objects and how they came to be in possession of in the UK, the British Empire. And yeah, like you said, just it's not about destroying artifacts, it's about uncovering, revealing the history, which, sorry, I know I was very ranty in my beginning, I was still a bit excited about everything, but you know, just, I didn't get taught this at school. I just presented these objects as things to look at. Look at this history, but never the full history. And I think, yeah, this engaging with the artifacts in this way, it's destructive, but it's been a long time coming. People more educated than I am have been asking for this to happen. The removal of statues, the education of the full history of the UK, have been asking for it for decades, probably centuries, and we're fed up. So I'm glad it's happening, this kind of thing, and we're all learning a lot. Certainly I am as well.
Can I add something there? I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was this amazing, the Sydney Biennial this year in Australia was curated by an amazing artist called Brooke Andrew, who's an Indigenous artist, and the focus of all of the artists in the huge show, there was a huge range of Indigenous artists from around the world, and one whose name I have shamefully forgotten right now did this amazing piece at the Biennial, which I believe happened before all of this, the sort of intense focus on the Black Lives Matter and the monuments debates around the world. But it's this absolutely stunning image if you haven't seen it. And what was done there was that the shape of like a pedestal with, you know, the sort of classic statue on top of it was kind of laid down on the ground and cut out into a relief on the grass. So there's actually this sort of flattened horizontal, cut out like a grave site for one of these monuments, and it's just a really stunning image. I'll see if I can find the link while the discussion goes on, and I'll put it in the chat. Oh, somebody's already done it? Oh no. Oh yes, of course, the Nefertiti thing. Okay, thanks. That was it.
Can I continue? Mary, I had a question about your project. You introduced sort of what you work with more generally, and I can see it in your screen behind you too. And it was almost to say, or I took it to be like, oh, and this is sort of a departure. You talked about the work relationship to minimalism, but it occurred to me in listening to you that it also has a tie really to like conceptual art, like Sol LeWitt conceptual art, and that sort of algorithmic tradition in conceptual art. And sort of through that lens, I think that the work that's in the show here and your feminist AI work, they seem very consistent, like with affective, value-laden engagements with the algorithm. I wondered if you could speak more about that, but then also what it is to be sort of working with the algorithm in relationship to, well, memorialization and loss, and the way in which the project is tied to, it's physically tied, it indexes the ongoing, you know, coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that question. It's a good one, and it is really the driver behind, like my motivation was really, first of all, in COVID, I'm working on this AI. I ended up in Texas. My AI machine is in another state. I'm like working internationally. I'm sending files all over the place. Like making that project, it was really hindered. So I'm still working on it, but I wanted to do a project that was really engaged with the everyday I saw right in front of me. So I was doing a series of hopscotches about confinement, and I was doing these things, you know, like how are our embodied selves having some kind of relationship to this. And this particular drawing piece was something I wanted to do something every day that could actually kind of be a barometer and be a memorial that has this everyday quality, kind of like, you know, it's quite a trope in minimalism, actually. But what's interesting is that minimalism really stepped away from any kind of political meaning, any kind of social importance, and said that they were kind of, you know, trying to find this core. And that's exactly what a particular branch of digital artists did for the last 20 years. You know, like this kind of formal explorations. And I really critique formal exploration. I always want to contextualize formal exploration. So I kind of appropriated, you know, computational drawing starting from the 60s on, and decided to make it mean something, which, you know, hopefully it works. I don't know, but it's certainly the case that I'm sitting around constantly racking my head around every single object, including Zoom, that we are using is framing our relations, our interactions, and our consciousness, right? So this is just bizarre that a bunch of guys in a room, white guys in a room, like said, hey, how about we do it this way and this way? And then suddenly it's our lives and it rules the world. Like, this is a bizarre and bad thing. So every project of mine is coming from that standpoint of like, well, what, you know, how do we even think about what it means to make our AIs that make images? Who's making AIs with images? This is kind of an extension of my project Help Me Know the Truth, where I was actually using a reverse correlation algorithm to model new faces, and then people judge them in the gallery. But this one, the AI is so. Check it out. It's almost impossible to train an AI on the images of women artists, and I'm just even women generally broadly categorized. I'm not even talking about diasporic women or, you know, this kind of like more specificity in terms of identity. Our national institutions around the world do not even attempt to record gender of artists in the databases. So you cannot even go find, you know, women artists at the Louvre, for example. So if you can't find them, and then of course their work is obviously undercollected and obviously all these other things, but even the work that they have is not even marked. And so finding this, I've been making web scrapers and talking to people at institutions and doing weird hacks to get enough training data to train these AIs. And so it just reveals the entire recording of women's work. It reveals, you know, all kinds of other gender and identity inequities in institutions, and just the lost history. So in a way, that's kind of a memorial too, even though I don't know if that comes out in the work. But yeah, I'm having a lot of memorial, but I'm really happy today. I'm like kind of rejoicing, but I'm also wanting to remember, and I think critique is a kind of memorial, right? Like when we try to unearth something and bring it to a new space, it can be that way anyway. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, you know, it also, in a way that Carla alluded to before, it's the works we have necessarily compartmentalized so that, you know, they're organized in this screening, or these are particularly strong resonances. But right, your work is this for the show is very specific, presented in that context. But I hear it now speaking to Caroline's project in a way, in terms of talking about the algorithms and facial recognition, and I hear it speaking to Faith's project in terms of the affective attachments that are now mediated by technologies, and then, you know, to Maggie's and the claustrophobia of it all. I mean, I don't know if one of you wants to sort of pick up on those themes and connections that you recognize despite the strong divergences in your projects otherwise. Caroline, in fact, Caroline, you sort of got cut short. You were so respectful of the time. I don't know if you'd want to sort of say more about what you're up to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on a few different projects. One forthcoming within the next year with you, Clark, which is really exciting on looking looking at internet architecture, specifically related to violence and algorithms. So looking at how people are congregating and using different forms of technology, like generally the internet, but then looking more deeply at social networks and how the architecture and design of them sort of can facilitate these spaces of violence, of aggression, of harassment, of white supremacy, etc. And I'm also working on a few things right now, just also in that vein, some different video pieces of like misinformation, disinformation labeling, and yeah, like the interstitials of warning labels inside of places, inside of social networks, and how some places don't have any labels at all. So I'm really interested in this sort of software built environment, one that we inhabit that is like hyper constrained and hyper designed, but not necessarily one that we like physically feel or see. So just playing with a lot of different forms of architecture. But yeah, so that's what I've been working on. And I have like a few things in mind, again, still related to like emotion recognition, but those are like very like nascent ideas at the moment.
My question about the motion recognition is that the complexity of emotions and the ways in which expression is often, it's not only sort of complex, it's often like counter to your expectation. Like you'd say, you might laugh and smile because you're afraid, something like that. It seems like such a fundamental insight. Is it not acknowledged by the industry at all?
I mean, I feel like it is at times, but there's this very like positivist view that Silicon Valley takes in terms of technology that really also permeates into the design world and like the mainstream design spaces of this idea that we can like tech build a better world, as opposed to like looking at the much harder thing, which is how do you address and confront daily injustice, which I'm sure for a lot of Americans in the room, we see that reflected right now with the election. Like the deeper systemic issues also related to things like the election isn't just easy answers. It's that you exist inside of things like gerrymandering, like a space where where there are assumptions about rules and then assumptions of how people relate to those rules. So like a lot of rhetoric around, oh, Republicans aren't following a set of rules. Well, you know, those are soft rules that are not necessarily agreed upon, right? That a lot of the real power in this election wasn't just recognizing that Trump is a bad person, but like having to do very hard work to counteract that, where, you know, like we saw a lot of progressive organizing in spaces like Georgia. The reason I mention these things is like to actually solve or combat things like injustice. It's not just donating money to a campaign, it's also donating money and doing all of this much harder work. So like combating these spaces, it's not something you can very easily build an app to fix, because that doesn't really fix anything. It's almost like window dressing. And that kind of like internalization and recognition that it's easy to build injustice, it's hard to like confront it, is something that is, I think, currently being addressed inside of design spaces, but not like actively, like thoughtfully addressed. And like maybe I'm hopeful that like this idea of hard work will gain momentum, as opposed to, oh, like I can build, for example, with my art project feminist data set, people are like, oh, so like once you build that art project, like Facebook can use it to like elevate feminist content. It's like, that's not how that works technically, but also like you can't just build one thing to solve all these problems. And I feel like that's a lot of the critical design work I like to do, is sort of create this fake real like Band-Aid, but then also pointing out that like this Band-Aid that I've made cannot scale. It should not scale Like it's a provocation to like push for what things could look like, but like this one small thing can't like fix a society, right? So it's like, as we make like open source fixes or provocations, like those small things can't fix all of Facebook, right? So I think that recognition that it's really hard to cause change is something that is like a very deep allergy to technologists, not just I think Silicon Valley, but I think like everyday designers and engineers, right? And I hope that people are aware of that, but that's, I don't know, so that's like, those are like deep themes I like to play with like as a designer, which is why I often like to make things that look like products.
Can I just add something then to you?
Please.
I feel like lots of little things being done by all of us. I mean, it really is time to step up. And I saw this amazing talk by a friend of mine who's a lecturer called Johnny Golding, and it was called, it was about courage that she'd taken, inspired by Black Lives Matter writings earlier this year. And yeah, I just think, I know the little, I mean, small little things isn't enough, but so many artists are stepping up and believing that art has a place in changing consciousness, making connections between things that are difficult and hard to look at, and needs massive imagination that, you know, our paucity of imagination just being beaten down by all this shit that's exploding around us finally at last. And also I think at the beginning of lockdown I thought, here we go, this is it, oh my god, we're living it, it's that, here's the change. Like governments realise they can shut everything down overnight, so that must mean they're all gonna realise they can make massive inroads into climate crisis by decisions that are international and for the good of all life, not human in particular. And obviously that was totally naive of me, but I think I actually am in a place at the moment where I feel like that's our job. We are all guides in different small ways, and we affect the little bits of place and time around us and individuals who respond to the work. And yeah, anyway, that's just, I just think that's all, it's not all we can do, like it's a small thing, like it's a nothing. It's all we can do is what we can do each. I'm done.
And we need to be doing it, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Nath and Mark and Shaya, and if I didn't, am I on, by the way? I can't hear myself.
You're on,
all of a sudden.
Carla.
Oh, okay. So other artists in the show, I know Susan had to leave, but you know, thank you so much for attending today, and your talks will be coming up, but also if you would like to, you know, participate or share anything, again, very happy to have you do that.
Can I continue with my questions?
Sure. I just wanted to put that call out because I'm so happy to see.
Yes, welcome.
People here.
You know, Greta, just from your presentation, I was struck by this idea of kind of living with the pollution. In other words, not adopting a sort of a moralistic before and after, but kind of recognizing the hybrid nature of our state. And again, not living with the pollution. It can't mean accepting it, but somehow this seems to be consistent with this question about the ongoing work of the situation that we find ourselves in, and in some ways these crises being an exacerbation of conditions that we were already in the midst of. I mean, is that language appropriate? And I suppose the question is, if there's a kind of like critical insight to be like, well, actually, this is this newfound state. I wonder what kind of agency there is in that. Like, have you thought about that? Like, what's the agency in that condition?
Yeah, I mean, so I would start by saying that I definitely don't think I personally have reached a point where I feel like I have gone beyond moralizing about it. Like, I'm still definitely full on in the panic and the moralizing for sure. But in the scope of making a work about it, I wanted to reach for something else. And I do think that sometimes, you know, that can be helpful to think about, not just, you know, we tend to, you know, be very binary in thinking about a lot of these narratives and sort of and that can be really limiting, I think. In terms of agency, it's a really interesting question, because something that I didn't speak about but that's absolutely central to that work was Ursula Le Guin's notion of the carrier bag theory of fiction, which talks about sort of being an antithesis to what she calls the prick story, which is the idea of like a person, an agent, usually a man, going out into the world in some way and acting upon the world and creating this change in the world in that sense, which is a very penetrative sort of narrative. And it's one that, you know, that really runs throughout most of human storytelling that I know of, like throughout centuries. And that's really something that I tried in every possible way that I could to act against. And, you know, Ursula Le Guin describes this so brilliantly in her essay, the idea that, you know, to make a narrative, you first carve a bowl, and then or weave a basket, and with that concave shape, you go out and you collect pieces to put into that carrier. And then all of those pieces are sort of together. And amongst that network of interacting, you know, ideas, whatever, there's a sort of cross-pollination going on, and the story kind of comes out of that. And I mean, that's how I'm trying to think about it a lot more these days, because I think all of these narratives that just that frame things in terms of, you know, our action, or how are we going to fix this, or, you know, what are the courses of action we're going to take, I think most of the time they lead to something worse. And I think that, you know, we have to think a lot more about a reaction, about being embedded within a cyclical interactive system, and not trying to think about how to, you know, fix something with one sweep, which is really related also to what Caroline was talking about with, you know, tech and the idea of fixing the world and solving the world with a simple app, you know. And that narrative is also used a lot in the sort of climate catastrophe space as well, of people thinking about, you know, what one brilliant action are they going to have that's going to change the world. I mean, even, you know, there are scientists out there. I saw one earlier this year, or maybe it was late last year, that was also a tech hack essentially, that was looking at, you know, scanning the world for different forests, and this was supposed to somehow, you know, tell us where we can plant things around the world, and that's going to like solve climate change, you know. I mean, as if, you know, and then what other problems are going to happen as a result of such a kind of, again, like a prick story of going out there and like injecting ourselves into the world in this way, in this totally unnuanced way as well. And I think that's really what the work is about for me. It's about trying to have less hubris, I think, in thinking about these problems, and trying to think about them in a more just in a more local way, a more tender way, something where we have more of a stake in it. Of course, Haraway is, you know, writes about that beautifully in Staying with the Trouble. Yeah, I don't know if that really answers the question. I definitely don't feel like I have any sort of solutions to it, but I do think that it has become very clear what the solution is not. And the solution is not, you know, any one monolithic thing that's going to kind of, you know, revert us to some previous sort of paradise or something. I don't know.
Yeah, if I can inject something there. I second all of Greta's frustrations, but I'm just starting a project with a marine microbiologist in the Yucatan, Luisa Falcon, and we were brought together by this project called New Nature of the Goethe Institute in Montreal. And she's a specialist in cyanobacteria, which if anyone saw my post in the chat, was, you know, the cyanobacteria are the oldest fossils on the planet, and about 4 billion years ago, apparently they set off the great oxygenation event. They somehow figured out how to photosynthesize and started producing oxygen, which didn't exist in a free-floating form before. That killed off like a lot of life at that point, because it couldn't, for them, oxygen was poisonous, but it allowed, you know, plants and animals that we know today to evolve. So that's, and they still make most of the oxygen that we breathe on this earth. So, in the Yucatan, there's these, they're called stromatolites. They're sort of like accretions of these cyanobacteria over thousands of years or longer. And the outer layers, you know, they look sort of like reefs of some sort, and the outer layers are still living cyanobacteria, however. But she says, you know, people go over there and they play in the water, they clamber over these, and they kill the cyanobacteria. And she said, you know, for forests at this point, there is this sort of carbon payment system where countries can say, okay, we will if you know, some body gives us money, we will preserve this forest, and that is a carbon sink, and that will help the balance in the world. And that doesn't exist for these stromatolites. It does exist to some extent for mangroves and the water, but her specific interest in working with me was she said, you know, we have to somehow make it easy for not just the public, but also the politicians and the policymakers to understand that these are living creatures and that they're valuable, and they're not just rocks. They're not just dead rocks. They're not only living structures, but they're important, not just for this local area, but actually on a worldwide scale for keeping oxygen in the atmosphere and as a carbon sink. So, so she sees a very specific role that artists can play, you know, working on these environmental issues like Greta and like so many other people here, of making people realize, making a broader public realize how things are connected, how things are important, and specifically what we're doing to, you know, poison very important parts of the world that are essentially invisible for us, you know, because they're underwater, or they're microscopic, or they only exist in areas where, you know, people or the people in countries who are doing the most destruction don't live. So you know, that I found an incredibly positive message from her on really how, you know, our pathetic efforts might actually help. And I do, you know, I do see over the decades of making work that, you know, a well-written article in a newspaper can maybe convey a whole lot more information, but you can't repeat that article every couple months in a different, you know, part of the country or the world or whatever. You know, it's an article, and then people read it, and then, you know, maybe years later in some collection you can talk about it. But as artists, we can and we do go out and show the work in different places, and we show it, you know, often if we can. And, you know, if that work gets people talking about the issues, then that's actually, you know, it's actually hitting people up a lot more than that one article that got published in that one journal and then can't be published again in that form because you've already heard it, you've already read it, and you don't want to read it again. So Yeah, I think, you know, we do have a role to play, and it is valuable, and other people outside of the art community also think it's valuable, which, you know, it's like, okay, let's go into 2021 and let's like get those people. Okay.
We matter.
For sure.
Clark, I just want to comment, you know, it's a 9 or 10 for a few people. And so we have some people logging off. I just want to give you all that option, you know, in terms of your time.
Maybe, I mean, we've been at it for 2 hours,
yeah.
and we're meeting again next Saturday. So I think this has been a terrific event, and I'm grateful for all your contributions. But maybe we should sign off until next time.
Yeah, I'm just starting to see some sleepy faces.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It has been such a joy to see you all today and to celebrate your work and your ideas and your research. Thank you so very much. And I look forward to seeing you all again in some digital space or another soon. All right.
Yeah, thank you, Carla.
Stay in touch.
Bye. Thank you.
And Greta, we should get together in Munich.
Call me.
First time I've seen her in a while. Oops.